Russia killed at least 12 people and injured 90 others in a huge attack on the Ukrainian capital last week. The attack on civilians was so bad that even prompted US President Donald Trump to issue a rare public criticism of Vladimir Putin. The assault was the deadliest on Ukrainian capital Kyiv since last summer. Explosions shook buildings. It sent more than 15,000 people into the subways to take shelter. Clouds of smoke were seen rising over the city even as the sun came up. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said that nearly 70 missiles, including ballistic missiles, and about 150 attack drones had targeted cities across Ukraine, notably targeting the capital, Kyiv. Zelensky had to cut short a trip to South Africa and return to Kyiv in light of the newfound Russian aggression.
Сьогодні вранці наша країна пройшла через нову російську атаку, дуже масштабну, дуже. Більш ніж 200 повітряних цілей. Це ракети, в тому числі балістичні та ударні дрони. На жаль, на превеликий жаль, є руйнування, є втрати у нашій столиці, в інших наших містах, в усіх.
In the aftermath of the attack, for a change, it was President Vladimir Putin who provoked President Donald Trump's frustration. Vladimir, stop, in all capital letters, Trump blared out over his Truth social media platform after Russia launched its most brutal attack on Kyiv in months. But Trump's rebuke of Vladimir was seen as a rare expression of disappointment and not necessarily anger at Vladimir Putin, an emotion that he has hardly reserved for Putin since this war began. The post addressed to Putin was more like Trump pleading with the Russian leader, who is clearly not following Trump's peace plan. Trump further went on to say that the attack was not necessary and it was very bad timing. Earlier, Trump had said that both Putin and Zelensky would be fools if they did not accept his peace plan.
If for some reason one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're just going to say you're foolish, you're fools, you're horrible people, and we're going to just take a pass.
But Trump kept up his social media rants for his more familiar target, President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine. Zelensky had said that Ukraine would never formally cede Crimea to its Russian occupiers. That seemed to have got Trump's goat. In Trump's view, Ukraine lost Crimea years ago, and it was now losing this war. But that didn't stop Trump from meeting Zelensky at the Vatican when both men had gathered there for the funeral of Pope Francis. Reportedly, the meeting went off fine after the fracas that happened at the Oval Office in the White House.
They have a tough road ahead, okay? And we had a good meeting. It was a nice meeting. It was a beautiful meeting. I'll tell you, it's the nicest office I've ever seen. It was a beautiful scene. But he was very, look, he wants to do something good for his country. Thinks he's doing a good job, and he's working hard. We'll see what happens. It's a very complicated deal. He told me that he needs more weapons, but he's been saying that for 3 years, He needs more weapons, and we're going to see what happens. I want to see what happens with respect to Russia. Because Russia had been surprised and disappointed, very disappointed that they did the bombing of those places after discussions.
Are you going to talk to Putin again?
Yeah, I will.
In Trump's understanding, the situation is clear. Ukraine is never going to get Crimea back, and it will never ever be a part of NATO. And none of this is likely to drive the Russians from the territory that they've already seized in eastern Ukraine. So here's the deal that Trump is offering. Accept the ground reality, adjust the front lines to reduce Ukraine from the 4 eastern oblasts, and get the peace deal done. In the process, Trump doesn't quite care for the Ukrainians or the Europeans, because this deal is between the two heavyweights, Trump and Putin. In Russia, people close to the Kremlin say that Putin's calculation is very simple. Until now, the Russian president has been convinced that he has more to gain on the battlefield than by accepting the deal that Trump has offered. Even agreeing to a temporary ceasefire, Putin believes would mean surrendering negotiation leverage, that it would only make sense to do so after major concessions from Ukraine. At the same time, Putin does not want to foreclose the possibility of ending the war, and he also does not want to offend Trump in the process. And Trump, given his obvious sympathy for Putin and distaste for Zelensky, has given the Russian leader plenty of reason to think that he can push the envelope.
What concessions has Russia offered up thus far to get to the point where you're closer to peace?
Stopping the war, taking the whole country. Pretty big concession.
Putin believes that as long as he has the battlefield advantage, he can gain benefits not just in terms of seizing territory, but also in terms of undermining Ukraine's defense capability and ultimately demoralizing the Ukrainian people. Which is why Putin, just to appeal to Trump, has announced a unilateral ceasefire at the battle lines from the 8th to the 11th of May. This will coincide with Russia's Victory Day celebrations on the 9th of May and will no doubt appease Trump. In Moscow, Putin met with Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff for the second time this month and the fourth time since Trump became president back in January. In Europe and the United States, the Trump administration was widely criticized for outlining a potential peace deal that seemed heavily skewed towards Russia. Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance expressed a readiness both to recognize Russia's annexation of Crimea and to freeze the current front lines, a de facto acceptance of Russia's occupation of nearly 1/5 of Ukrainian territory. The current deal that's being floated by the Trump administration would fall well short of Putin's stated war aims. The concessions offered by Trump do not provide for Russian control of all of Ukrainian land, which Putin had claimed to be part of Russia. And most importantly, it does not limit the size of Ukraine's army, something that Putin has demanded since the beginning of this war. While Trump has made it clear that Ukraine will not join NATO forever, Putin's designs on a renewed Russian sphere of influence in Eastern Europe goes much further than that. Weeks before he invaded Ukraine in 2022, Putin called on NATO to halt all further expansion eastwards and to withdraw military infrastructure that was placed in Eastern Europe after 1997. Trump's deal, the one that he's offering currently, does not seem to distinguish between a ceasefire and a settlement. He appears not to care that there is no moral equivalence between Russia and Ukraine in this conflict. He does not seem to care that Putin was the one who was responsible for starting this war, not Zelensky, and that any settlement must involve the Europeans, who are far more imperiled by Russian aggression than the United States. Trump, the famous deal maker from New York, only wants one thing and only knows one thing: how to make deals. He wants a big ceasefire announcement by both Moscow and Kyiv so that he can claim credit for it.